September 9th, 1943. Late afternoon. Southern Italy, just outside a dust-choked village near Salerno. The air smells like sweat, smoke, and crushed olives. Private Carlo Bianchi shifts his rifle from one aching shoulder to the other as the column halts. His uniform hangs loose on his frame, wool rubbing against skin that has grown thinner with every month of war. The buttons no longer sit right. Nothing does. Ahead of him, prisoners are being brought in. American prisoners. You can hear them before you fully see them. Boots on gravel, low voices, the scrape of equipment. Not frantic. Not desperate. Just steady. Bianchi squints. This is not what he expected. The first American steps into view. He is tall. Upright. His jacket is worn, but clean. His face is dusty. Yes, but full. Cheeks rounded. Eyes alert. He walks without dragging his feet. Behind him come more. Not stumbling. Not collapsing. Not starving. Bianchi feels a strange, almost embarrassing heat rise in his chest. You can almost feel it too, that instant when something you've believed collides head-on with something you're seeing. Because for months, Italian soldiers have been told the same thing. The Americans are soft, decadent, weak. They live on excess. They lack discipline. They will crumble under hardship. And yet here they are. Captured. Defeated in this moment. But looking better than the men guarding them. Sergeant Luigi Ferraro mutters something under his breath. What do they eat? He asks no one in particular. No one answers. Because everyone is thinking the same thing. Bianchi glances down at his own hands. They tremble slightly, not from fear, but from hunger. His last proper meal was days ago. Thin soup. A crust of bread. Coffee stretched so far it barely tastes like anything. The American POWs are searched. Chocolate bars fall from pockets. Hard candy. Cigarettes. American cigarettes. One of the guards swallows hard. This is wrong. This is not how it's supposed to look. The propaganda posters back at camp flash through Bianchi's mind. Caricatures of bloated Americans, lazy smiles, overfed bodies that wouldn't last a week in the field. But the men standing here, they look like soldiers, well-fed soldiers. An American private catches Bianchi staring. For a split second, there's eye contact. No hatred. No arrogance. Just curiosity. Almost sympathy. Bianchi looks away immediately, a flush creeping up his neck. He doesn't know why that look unsettled him more than a rifle ever could. Around them, the Italian line grows quiet. Usually, prisoners are loud. Complaining. Begging. Angry. These men aren't. They sit when told. Stand when ordered. Some even crack quiet jokes among themselves. One offers a cigarette to another, lighting it with calm hands. Calm hands. Bianchi hasn't felt calm in months. You can almost feel the shift happening, not dramatic, not explosive, but subtle and corrosive. A question forms in the back of every Italian soldier's mind. If these are the prisoners, what do the ones still fighting look like? Ferraro finally speaks again, his voice low. They don't look beaten, he says. No one disagrees. As the prisoners are marched toward a temporary holding area, Bianchi watches their backs. Straight backs. Strong strides. He thinks of his brother on the Eastern Front. The last letter spoke of cold, hunger, and boots worn through at the soles. He thinks of his own rations shrinking week by week. And now he's guarding men from a country he was told was rotting from excess. The lie doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks. That night, as the camp settles, the image won't leave him. The contrast. Not victory versus defeat, but nourishment versus deprivation. Bianchi lies awake, listening to stomachs growl in the darkness. He wonders how a nation at war can still feed its soldiers so well, even when they're captured. And if they can do that, what else have they been lying about? Somewhere beyond the hills, American artillery thuds steadily, distant, methodical, confident. For the first time, Bianchi doesn't hear it as the sound of an enemy struggling. He hears it as the sound of a system that isn't breaking. And as sleep finally takes him, one thought lingers, uncomfortable, dangerous, impossible to unthink. If the enemy eats better than you, what does that say about how this war will end? Morning comes without ceremony. No bugle. No hot coffee. Just the pale Italian sun crawling over tents and stone walls, exposing the same tired faces it left the night before. Private Carlo Bianchi wakes with his stomach already aching. Not sharp pain, worse than that, the dull, constant emptiness that never quite goes away. He joins the ration line. A ladle of watery soup. Bread so dry it flakes in his hands. No seconds, no complaints. The men eat slowly, trying to trick their bodies into feeling satisfied. Then the Americans are brought out. And the myth dies a little more. They line up under guard, hands behind their backs, boots dusty, but intact. One of them yawns. Another stretches his shoulders like a man preparing for a long day's work. An Italian corporal opens a crate, captured supplies taken from the Americans the day before. Inside, canned meat, powdered milk, biscuits wrapped in waxed paper. Real food. The corporal freezes for a second, then snaps the lid shut as if embarrassed. You can almost feel the thought spreading through the ranks. They weren't exaggerating. They weren't lucky. This is normal for them. Sergeant Luigi Ferraro watches closely. Ferraro has been a soldier since before the war turned ugly. He remembers Ethiopia, Albania, the early days when supplies still came on time and morale still mattered. This is different. These American POs are not anomalies. They are evidence. One of the prisoners, Private First Class Jimmy O'Hara, Massachusetts accent still thick despite months overseas, stumbles slightly as he's pushed forward. Ferraro instinctively reaches out, steadying him. O'Hara looks up, surprised. "Thanks," he says quietly. Ferraro nods once, unsure what to do with the word. Thanks. Not begging, not pleading, just human. Later that morning, rumors move faster than orders. They get meat every day. They have coffee even at the front. They throw food away. Some of it is exaggerated. Some of it isn't. And the worst part, no officer steps in to correct it. Because they can't. The Italian army has been running on shortages for years. Fuel, ammunition, boots, food. Everyone knows it, but no one is supposed to say it out loud. Propaganda fills the gap. Posters promise resilience, strength, moral superiority. But propaganda doesn't fill stomachs. Bianchi is assigned guard duty near the POW enclosure that afternoon. The Americans sit in the shade, trading jokes in low voices. One produces a harmonica, not confiscated because no one thought to take it. The music drifts across the camp. Light, casual, almost cheerful. It feels obscene. Bianchi catches himself resenting them, not for being enemies, but for being better supplied. That resentment quickly turns inward. Why are they eating better than us? Ferraro overhears two Italian soldiers whispering. If they feed prisoners like this, one says, what do they feed their frontline troops? The other doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. By afternoon, the realization hardens into something more dangerous than anger. Doubt. Because if the Americans can afford to feed captured enemies better than Italy feeds its own soldiers, then the story of a decadent, collapsing enemy is a lie. And if that is a lie, what else is? The camp commandant tries to reassert control. He gives a speech. He talks about sacrifice, about honor, about temporary hardship. The words sound thin in the open air. Behind him, an American P wipes his mouth with a clean handkerchief. Bianchi notices. He can't stop noticing now. That evening, Ferraro sits with Bianchi near the perimeter fence. You ever wonder, Ferraro says slowly, why they look like that? Bianchi shrugs. They eat better, he says. Ferraro nods. And what does that mean? The question hangs. Because it's no longer about food. It's about capacity. Bianchi thinks of factories he's heard about, American factories, running day and night, of ships crossing the Atlantic in endless lines, of supplies that don't have to be rationed into nothingness. He thinks of his own country, stretched thin, asking more from men who already have nothing left to give. And suddenly, hunger feels like more than a physical thing. It feels like a verdict. That night, an American POW coughs, just once, and another hands him a biscuit without hesitation. A biscuit. Bianchi looks away. Not because he's angry, but because something inside him is breaking. The belief that they are fighting a weaker enemy, the belief that endurance alone will win, the belief that hunger is a shared burden. As darkness settles, the distant sound of Allied aircraft hums overhead. Steady. Confident. Ferraro speaks again, barely above a whisper. If this is how they treat prisoners, he says, this war isn't ending the way they told us. Bianchi doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Because the next question is already forming. Dangerous. Irreversible. Impossible to ignore. If the enemy is stronger than we were led to believe, how long can this really last? The break doesn't happen all at once. There's no announcement, no argument, no open defiance. It happens quietly, the way rot spreads through wood long before the beam finally gives way. Private Carlo Bianchi notices it first in the small things. Guards stop shouting as much. Orders are still given, but without conviction. Rifles hang a little lower on shoulders. Men lean on walls longer than regulations allow. The Americans notice too. They don't exploit it. They don't provoke. They just exist. Calm, fed, unbroken. One afternoon, an Italian supply truck arrives late, again. The driver jumps down, cursing under his breath. There's less this time. Always less. Ferraro checks the manifest, then closes it without comment. Nearby, an American POW unwraps a ration biscuit and snaps it cleanly in half, offering a piece to another prisoner without hesitation. Bianchi feels something twist inside his chest. That biscuit represents more than calories. It represents margin. The Americans can share. Italy can barely sustain. Propaganda posters still hang on cracked walls. Caricatures of fat, greedy Americans. Slogans about moral decay and softness. Bianchi studies one as he stands guard. The poster peels at the edges, paper curling in the heat. He wonders when it stopped being funny and started being insulting. At night, conversations shift. Men talk less about victory. Less about battles. Less about Rome or Berlin. They talk about food. About letters from home describing ration cuts. About wives trading possessions for bread. About children growing up on substitutes. Someone mentions that the Americans even feed their prisoners properly. No one laughs. Ferraro sits sharpening a bayonet that no longer needs sharpening. You know, he says quietly, when I was a boy, we were taught that war was about courage. He pauses. This war, he continues, feels like it's about factories. Bianchi nods. He understands. Courage doesn't create calories. Faith doesn't manufacture trucks. Belief doesn't ship wheat across oceans. An American POW named O'Hara is put to work carrying crates under supervision. He moves steadily, efficiently, not rushed. He doesn't look like a man wasting away in captivity. One of the Italian guards watches him for a long moment, then mutters. How can they afford this? No one answers. Because the answer is too large. The realization creeps deeper. If America can feed its soldiers this well, if it can feed them this well after capture, then its supply lines are not fragile. They are vast. And vast things are hard to stop. Bianchi remembers a speech broadcast months earlier. The announcer had said the Allies were nearing collapse, that their people lacked endurance. Bianchi thinks of the POWs laughing softly over a shared joke, chewing on real bread. He wonders what collapse is supposed to look like. The psychological shift is subtle but permanent. Italian soldiers stop seeing the Americans as enemies weakened by luxury. They start seeing them as representatives of something unstoppable. A system. A machine. One that feeds itself even while fighting a global war. Ferraro puts the bayonet away. "Do you know what scares me?" he asks. Bianchi shakes his head. Ferraro looks toward the POW enclosure. "They're not desperate," he says. "Desperate men make mistakes. These men don't have to." That night, a rumor spreads. Not shouted, whispered. Italy might be done. Not losing. Done. Bianchi lies awake, staring at the canvas above him. For the first time, hunger isn't the loudest thing in his mind. It's the thought that this war was decided somewhere far away, in fields, factories, and kitchens he will never see. And that no amount of sacrifice can change that. The realization doesn't make him angry. It makes him tired. Deeply, profoundly tired. Outside, an American POW hums softly. Not a patriotic song. Just a tune. Untroubled. And in that small human sound, Bianchi hears the collapse of a myth Italy built its war on. Tomorrow, something will change. Not officially, but permanently. Because once belief is gone, discipline follows. Then loyalty. Then the war itself. The change becomes impossible to ignore the following morning. Orders arrive late. Then not at all. Officers argue quietly near the command tent, their voices low, clipped, uncertain. No one is quite sure who is still in charge, Rome, the Germans, or no one. Private Carlo Bianchi senses it immediately. This isn't confusion. It's drift. The American POWs are assembled again, this time for relocation. As they stand in line, an Italian lieutenant walks past them, clipboard tucked under his arm. He stops. Not because of disobedience. Not because of a problem. But because of what he sees. Strong posture. Clean movements. Alert eyes. They look like men who expect to survive the war. That expectation is contagious. Bianchi escorts the column toward the road. As they pass through the village, civilians watch from doorways, thin faces, wary eyes, empty baskets. One old woman looks from the Italian guards to the American prisoners and then back again. Her expression says everything. She doesn't need propaganda to tell her who is winning. A truck pulls up to transport the POWs. American trucks. Captured weeks earlier, now repurposed. The irony is sharp. Even the vehicles feel more capable than the men operating them. As the prisoners climb aboard, one stumbles. Ferraro steps forward instinctively, steadying him. The American smiles. "Appreciate it," he says. Ferraro hesitates, then nods. No salute. No insult. Just acknowledgement. Two soldiers recognizing something in each other. You can almost feel the moment crystallize. This is no longer about who is right or wrong. It's about who has momentum. Who has reserves. Who has a future. As the trucks pull away, dust rises in thick clouds. The American POWs disappear down the road, not as defeated men, but as temporary interruptions in a system that will absorb their loss and keep going. Bianchi watches until they vanish. Then he looks at his hands again. Still shaking. Still empty. That afternoon, news spreads. The government has fallen. Italy is negotiating. Some say the war is over. Others say it's just changing masters. Either way, nothing feels solid anymore. Ferraro sits on an overturned crate, staring into the distance. "All that talk," he says quietly. "All those speeches." He gestures vaguely, as if pointing to years of slogans and promises. "And in the end," he continues, "it wasn't bullets that convinced us." Bianchi waits. It was food. The realization is brutal in its simplicity. Wars are not sustained by slogans. They are sustained by supply. The side that can feed its soldiers, even when captured, is not weak. It is dominant. Bianchi remembers something his father once told him. Never trust a man who tells you hunger is a virtue, he had said. At the time, it sounded cynical. Now it sounds prophetic. That night, German troops arrive. Their uniforms are sharp, their discipline rigid, but their eyes are tired too. They ask questions about supplies, about fuel, about food. The Italians have no good answers. The Americans are gone now, but their presence lingers. Like a mirror held up too close. Italy has seen the future. And it doesn't look Italian. As Bianchi lies down for the night, the meaning of the day settles in. The enemy was never decadent. The enemy was prepared. And preparation, more than courage, decides wars like this. Tomorrow, Italy will wake up on a different side of history. Not because of a battle. Not because of a defeat. But because belief finally gave way to reality. And reality is harder to fight than any army. The transition is quiet. No cheering crowds. No dramatic surrender ceremonies. Just new armbands, new orders, and the same hunger. Private Carlo Bianchi wakes up under a different flag, but his stomach doesn't care. It growls the same way it did yesterday. The soup tastes just as thin. The bread just as scarce. Only now, the lies have stopped. The Germans take over the camp within days. They move efficiently, briskly. Their discipline is sharp, but their supply situation is not. Their trucks arrive half empty. Their rations are measured carefully, tightly, nervously. Bianchi notices it immediately. The Germans look better equipped, but not better fed. That matters. American forces begin pushing north. Slowly. Methodically. Not desperate. Not reckless. Like men who know they have time. Refugees stream past the camp, civilians carrying everything they own in sacks and carts. They talk about American troops handing out food, chocolate, bread, canned meat. Some say even the children were fed first. Bianchi listens carefully. No one sounds surprised. Ferraro watches a group of civilians pass the gate. "Do you hear that?" he asks. Bianchi nods. The same story, again and again. Not guns. Not tanks. Food. The Americans are no longer prisoners now. They are advancing. And everywhere they go, the same pattern repeats. They arrive supplied. They stay supplied. They move on. Bianchi thinks back to the POWs, to their posture, their calm, their energy. They weren't strong because they were brave. They were brave because they were sustained. That distinction matters. One afternoon, a German sergeant inspects the Italian troops. He lectures them about discipline, about sacrifice, about endurance. Bianchi listens politely. But the words don't land anymore. He has seen the other side of endurance. It doesn't look like suffering. It looks like planning. Food becomes the quiet divider. Men who eat well stand straighter. They think more clearly. They endure longer. Men who don't obey out of exhaustion. Rumors spread again. This time, they are different. They are not about victory or defeat. They are about inevitability. When the Americans arrive, someone says, at least we'll eat. No one rebukes him. Not even the Germans. Bianchi realizes something unsettling. Hunger has changed loyalties before ideology ever could. Because hunger strips away abstraction. It reduces war to something brutally simple. Who can keep you alive? At night, Allied bombers pass overhead. They don't rush. They don't swarm chaotically. They come in waves. Organized. Endless. Supplied. Bianchi watches the contrails fade into the dark and thinks of factories far away, still running, still producing, still feeding the machine. The American advance accelerates. German resistance hardens, then thins. Italian units dissolve quietly. Some desert. Some surrender. Some simply stop moving. No speeches. No mutiny. Just the exhaustion of men who know the ending already. Ferraro says it plainly one evening. This war didn't end for us when Rome fell, he says. It ended when we realized we were hungry and they weren't. Bianchi doesn't argue. He can't. Because he remembers the look on the POWs' faces. Not fear. Not desperation. Certainty. That certainty is what finally kills the war. Not the guns. Not the bombs. But the knowledge that one side can absorb loss without breaking because it is fed, supplied, and planned for. The other cannot. As Allied troops draw closer, Bianchi feels something unexpected. Relief. Not because the fighting will end, but because the pretending will. The war didn't collapse at the front. It collapsed in the stomach. And once that happened, everything else followed. The end is no longer a question of if. Only when, spring, 1945. The hills are greener now. Wildflowers push through soil churned by boots and tires, growing where shell craters once smoked. The fighting has moved north, then east, then away. Private Carlo Bianchi stands near a roadside outside a small Italian town, watching American troops pass. Not prisoners this time. Liberators. They march in columns that seem to have no end. Clean uniforms, full packs, vehicles rolling behind them in disciplined order, trucks stacked high with crates marked in neat stenciling, food, fuel, ammunition. Always more. You can almost feel the difference in the air, not triumph, but confidence. The kind that comes from knowing tomorrow is already planned for. An American soldier tosses a chocolate bar to a child watching from the roadside. The child catches it awkwardly, stunned. Bianchi feels his throat tighten. He has seen this before. Not the act, but the message behind it. We have enough. Later, after Italy has fully changed sides and the war's outcome is no longer in doubt, Bianchi sits with Ferraro outside a requisitioned farmhouse. They eat a meal provided by the Allies. Real bread. Meat. Coffee that actually tastes like coffee. Ferraro chews slowly, thoughtfully. You know, he says, we learned the truth before most people did. Bianchi looks at him. When? He asks. Ferraro smiles faintly. When we guarded prisoners who looked healthier than we did. That memory returns with startling clarity. The POWs won. Their posture. Their calm. Their quiet confidence. They were never just men in enemy uniforms. They were messengers. Unintentional ones. The propaganda had promised that the enemy was decadent, soft, and fragile. But propaganda cannot hide logistics forever. Because logistics show up in bodies. In energy. In resilience. In the ability to share food, even in captivity. Bianchi realizes now what truly shattered belief. Not a speech. Not a defeat. Not a surrender. But comparison. Standing side by side with the enemy and seeing, unmistakably, who was being sustained and who was being spent. After the war, historians will write about Italy's collapse in terms of politics, alliances, and battlefield pressure. All of it matters. But Bianchi knows the quieter truth. The war ended for many Italian soldiers the moment hunger became unequal. When the enemy's prisoners looked stronger than the guards. When the future arrived wearing an American uniform and carrying enough food for everyone. Years later, Bianchi will tell his son about the war. He won't talk much about gunfire, or fear, or heroics. He will talk about a line of American prisoners walking through a dusty village road, calm, fed, unbroken. And how, in that moment, he understood that the war was already lost. Not because Italy lacked courage, but because it lacked capacity. The lesson stays with him long after the uniforms are gone. Wars are not won by hatred. They are not won by belief alone. They are won by preparation, by the quiet, unglamorous work of feeding, supplying, and sustaining people through years of chaos. Bianchi finishes his coffee and stands. The road is clear now. The war has moved on. But the truth it revealed remains. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon in war isn't a gun or a bomb. It's a full stomach. Because a soldier who is fed believes in tomorrow. And belief, when backed by supply, is unstoppable.